everyone, it's Sevi. After much anticipation, Silverwolf is finally hacking her way into our accounts and hearts to steal our Stellar Jades and pawn the enemies. In this Silverwolf guide, I'll go over her kit, abilities, Eidolons, relic builds, light cones, team comps, and my overall impressions of her power and value to help you maximize her potential or decide if she's a worthy pull for you. Let's get started. We'll first cover her kit, abilities, and what makes her special. Silverwolf is a Quantum Nihility unit that specializes in applying debuffs on enemies to help boost your team's damage. Her most valuable and unique ability is the Weakness Implant effect, which opens up new ways to fight enemies and opportunities to use more unconventional team comps. Silverwolf's skill, Allow Changes, is the core of her playstyle. It deals quantum damage and lets her implant a weakness an enemy doesn't have yet, based on the elemental types present in your team. Furthermore, it reduces their resistance to that element type by 20%, which is how weaknesses typically are on enemies, and there's also a chance to apply an all-type resistance reduction which covers all elements. Her Weakness Implant is the major selling point of Silverwolf's kit as it opens up interesting team comps and new ways to create advantages against enemies your team normally wouldn't have. Note that only one Weakness Implant can be present on an enemy. If she uses her skill against the same enemy, it could replace the existing implant with another weakness. So if you already implanted the right weakness, you don't want to accidentally override it with another weakness type. I noticed this tends to happen in autoplay battles due to the AI, so watch out for that. You might also be wondering how the element probability works when you have a team composed of 3 same elements and 1 different element, and the enemy has neither of those elements' weaknesses present. Is it still a 50-50 chance or a 75-25 chance? Since the description doesn't say, I brute force tested this, and the resulting chance seems to be 50-50. How many members there are of a certain element in your team will not affect the chance, but rather simply how many elements there are on the team. Naturally, 3 elements means a 33% chance and 4 different elements means a 25% chance. But if a target enemy already has an inherent weakness to an element in your team, then that won't be considered for the probability chance. So for example, if you're fighting this enemy with an ice weakness using a team composed of only ice and quantum characters, then Silverwolf can only implant quantum against them. You can use this to your advantage as well to create a team and target a guaranteed element weakness that's best for the team. Understanding the possibilities and limitations of this weakness implant mechanic is very important for you to utilize and adapt Silverwolf in the best scenarios possible. Along with that, Silverwolf's ultimate, which costs 110 energy, is a big burst of quantum damage that can apply a huge defense shred debuff on a target enemy for 3 turns. That leads to a significant increase to your team's damage, especially when combined with her skill's debuffs. But wait, there's more! Additionally, her talent gives her a chance to apply an attack, defense, or speed debuff, or bug, for 3 turns on an enemy whenever Silverwolf attacks them. These are randomly selected, but what's interesting is that if one of the bugs is already applied, then Silverwolf's next attack will only proc one of the bugs that hasn't been applied yet. She can't reapply or refresh the same bug unless all bugs are already present. This is good news because it means it's way easier to simultaneously stack these bugs on an enemy and keep them on for several turns, especially if Silverwolf is fast enough. Silverwolf's basic attack simply deals quantum damage, but you can use it mainly for skill point generation and to trigger one of her bugs on a target enemy. If the right weakness implant has been set up, there's no need to keep using her skill again until you need to refresh the debuff. As for her technique, it initiates a battle to make her deal AoE quantum damage at the start. But even if the enemy doesn't have a quantum weakness, she will bypass that and still reduce their toughness. So if you want to set up a battle with toughness reduced on all enemies immediately, use her technique. As for her Ascension bonus abilities, her Ascension 2 ability extends the bug duration by 1 turn and lets her implant a random bug when an enemy is broken. This can trigger regardless of whether Silverwolf or another teammate breaks them, which is a helpful utility. Her Ascension 4 ability increases the duration of her skill's weakness implant by 1 turn, which is important to make her less skill point hungry. And her Ascension 6 ability gives an additional 3% all-type resistance reduction if she uses her skill on an enemy with at least 3 debuffs. So for her leveling priority, it will be her skill, followed by her ultimate and talent. All of her major traces are important, so you'll want to level them up equally to increase their base chances and multipliers. Her basic attack trace will be very low priority. Her bonus Ascension abilities are all important, so activate them to maximize her potential. Her stat bonus traces give effect hit rate, attack, and quantum damage, which are all great as well, so activate them when you have the materials to spare. Silverwolf is already amazing and cohesive at E0, so Eidolons are absolutely unnecessary, but let's go through them quickly and see what they add. E1 makes her ultimate generate 7 energy for every debuff on a target enemy, maxing at 5 times for 35 energy refunded. This practically makes her ult much more spammable, which makes the defense shred have more consistent uptime and can also lead to faster breaking against quantum weak enemies. E2 reduces your enemy's effect resistance by 20% to make it easier to apply debuff effects on them. This can impact your EHR stat targets on her, which I'll discuss in the Relic Stats section. E3 increases her skill and talent level by 2. E4 is very similar to her E1, but now it makes her ultimate deal additional quantum damage depending on how many debuffs are present on the target enemy, which caps at 5 times. E5 increases the ultimate and basic attack levels. And finally, E6 gives her attacks a universal 20% damage bonus for every debuff on the target enemy, which again caps at 5 times for a whopping 100% damage bonus. Now let's cover Silverwolf's relic builds. You could either prioritize her to be purely a debuff applier, or you can go for a balance of debuffing reliability and damage dealing to really optimize her damage contribution. But of course, we still have our actual DPSs to build, which is generally a higher priority than increasing Silverwolf's damage output. So if you're still in the early process of farming, don't sweat her damage output too much yet, as that takes a lot more investment. Anyway, let's start with her relic stats. First, I want to address the main question of how much effect hit rate, or EHR, should you run on Silverwolf. To recap, EHR helps increase the probability of an effect applying on an enemy, which also takes into consideration the base chance of that effect and the enemy's effect resistance and debuff resistance. Once effect hit rate and enemy resistance have been factored in, the real effect probability will be different from the effect's base chance. Since Silverwolf's whole playstyle is about weakness implants and debuffs, you want her application to be reliable enough. Otherwise, it could impact her team contribution, or worse, ruin your intended setups entirely. However, I don't think you need to reach a 100% real effect probability across all her abilities. Reaching about an 80 to 90% real effect probability for at least her skill can be good enough for me, and if ever a bad run occurs in your Memory of Chaos run where it's most important, there's always the reset button. If you want to see how the real effect probability changes, I'm linking an effect chance and EHR calculator in my description that you can make a copy of and try for your own use. But if you want a general recommendation, I would say having around 100% EHR is a comfortable enough spot. Thankfully, she has default sources of EHR already. When you unlock all her minor EHR traces, that totals up to 18%, but for now you might only be able to unlock up to 10% due to Trailblaze level restrictions. Then for her default light cone, we're getting a 4-star Silverwolf themed light cone for free, which gives 20% EHR at S1 and up to 40% EHR at S5, but other light cones give around the 20 to 40% range as well depending on superimposition. The Pan-Galactic set, her top recommended planar ornament, also gives 10% EHR, so that's already 40 to 60% EHR you can expect to get by default. If you can't hit around 100% yet, don't sweat it, as that comes with the pain and luck of relic farming. If you're bringing her in Simulated Universe, Nihility buffs can fill in any build shortcomings. If you'll use her under built in MOC, then just be ready to reset when bad luck strikes. Basically, EHR is important for Silverwolf to function most reliably. So, what are her preferred main stats? For the body piece, you can choose among effect hit rate, crit, or attack. An EHR main stat can be your default option, as it greatly helps to reach the recommended EHR target for reliable debuff application. But remember, you can also get EHR substat rolls on your relics anyway, which might be enough. In that case, you can go for crit rate or attack main stats to further enhance her damage. It really boils down to your relics and substat quality. For her feat piece, it's between speed or attack. Speed may generally be more preferable, as having her get in turn sooner lets you stack her debuffs faster, get energy sooner, generate skill points, and so on. But attack can also be an okay alternative, and you can cover her speed needs by getting substats and or through speed buffing teammates. Then for the planar sphere, go for quantum damage bonus, and for the link rope, you can choose between energy regeneration rate and attack. ERR helps guarantee faster ultimate recharging to refresh or reapply the defense shred effect sooner, as well as to help break quantum weak enemies faster. However, substat quality is again a big consideration, and external energy generating effects, or her E1 if you get it, may help compensate for having no ERR on her. For her substats, aim for EHR, speed, crit, and attack stats. Then for her relic sets, the ideal late game build is the 4-piece Genius of Brilliant Stars, since it gives quantum damage bonus and a defense ignore effect, which is really good. With Silverwolf's weakness implant, she can exploit the quantum weakness requirement of the 4-piece effect. However, getting a good full set is definitely hard, time-consuming, and requires a lot of luck. An alternative 4-piece set is the Musketeer set. It particularly increases attack and speed, which Silverwolf will appreciate. And since you already get a lot of free pieces just by exploring the world and getting level up rewards, you might have an easier time getting a good full set. Otherwise, just equipping 2-piece sets of quantum damage and attack is absolutely fine and still competitive, especially since it's easier to get really good stats on 2-piece combos. For the Planar Ornament set, the Pan-Galactic Commercial Enterprise is my top recommendation. It gives 10% effect hit rate by default, and it converts 25% of her EHR into attack, which caps at 100% EHR, which she'll have a lot of anyway. Alternatively, but less recommended, you could also go for other sets like Fleet of the Ageless for its supportive team-wide attack buff as long as you can hit 120 speed, or Sprightly Von Whack for the ERR and advance forward effect to apply her debuff ASAP at the start of battle. But for players who can't really farm good planar sets yet, just use whatever set you have that has the best main and substats. You might come across a break effect focus build which capitalizes on Silverwolf's ability to implant quantum weakness, the effects of quantum breaking, and her technique. While I can see a world where that could be something, my main issue is that it requires very specific conditions and highly optimized scenarios to at least be consistent, rather than going for more universal attack crit stats as a much more convenient way of boosting her personal damage, which is quite good to begin with anyway. So all in all, I would generally not recommend going for a break effect focus build and playstyle on her. Moving on to Silverwolf's light cones, the default choice is the event reward 4-star before the tutorial mission starts. It gives up to 40% EHR at S5 and energy regeneration from attacking defense reduced enemies, which Silverwolf can apply with either her ultimate or bug. It's amazing that we're getting this for free, as you can simply ignore most other 4-star and 3-star options. There are other viable choices which lean more into damage. One is the Goodnight and Sleep Well light cone, which gives a damage bonus depending on how many debuffs the target enemy has. Another is Resolution Shines, which can apply Ensnared on the enemy to reduce their defense. This can coexist with Silverwolf's other defense debuffs. Incessant Rain is her signature light cone, and it boasts high base stats, an EHR bonus, a crit rate bonus against enemies with at least 3 debuffs, and a chance to apply the Aether Code effect, which increases the damage received by affected enemies. Clearly, it's great for improving both of Silverwolf's debuffing and damage dealing capabilities, and just a generally good Nihility light cone. You might have also pulled Welt's signature light cone. While it definitely is a good boost for Silverwolf's damage, just note that the effect hit rate bonus only applies to the skill, which is unfortunate since her other debuffs come from other traces too, so that's one notable limitation of this light cone. But again, her default free-to-play light cone is already very good. You can save yourself the trouble of choosing by just sticking with that and saving your passes for future banners. When it comes to team building, having the right elemental coverage for battles is a major consideration. Thanks to her weakness implanting kit, Silverwolf is in the unique position to enable teams that normally wouldn't be effective against non-weak enemies. Aside from that, her Nihility kit specializes in debuffing the enemy's resistance and defense to amplify the damage your DPS units and overall team will do against those enemies. In order to exploit her weakness implant, you can bring a team with no element that the enemy is weak to, then use her to open that vulnerability. Ideally, the damage dealers and/or breakers will be the weakness you're targeting. Alternatively, the enemy might be weak to 1 or 2 elements that's already in your existing team, and Silverwolf can guarantee, or more likely implant, the remaining elemental weakness that a DPS or breaker on your team can exploit. Because of this dynamic, Silverwolf has a lot of interesting team comping potential moving forward. Now you can use DPSs you've heavily invested in more scenarios. Break-focused teams can also become more viable as well, and I'm sure there's more to discuss as new units come out and players get more creative. Be mindful that if your enemy has no weaknesses against any elements in your team and you're relying on Silverwolf to apply the best weakness implant, then the more elements that are competing, the more she will be subject to the risk of probability. If the enemy already has at least 1 or 2 weakness types present among your party members, then that helps reduce the randomness of Silverwolf's weakness implant. An ideal scenario could be if you bring in only 2 elements in the team to reduce that randomness. For example, if you bring in an an ice-focused team with Yanqing, Pella, and either March or Japard as the defensive unit, then that can maximize Silverwolf's ice weakness Implant, and Silverwolf will synergize really well with future Quantum units since being Quantum herself, she can make effective Quantum combos from her weakness Implant. She can also synergize well with those who also apply debuffs, whether from fellow Nihility units or not. Some Nihility equipment or effects are dependent on having debuffs on the enemy, which Silverwolf applies a lot of already. Stat debuffs can stack with similar debuffs too, like Pella's Defense Shred or Welt's Slow effect. Even debuffs from DPSs like Danheng's Slow or Damage over Time effects will also count as debuffs that certain Nihility related effects, such as Silverwolf's Eidolons or Light Cone, can take advantage of. But I also want to point out that even if you're not using Silverwolf to enable any special teams or weakness implant her teammates' elements, she still makes a good general Quantum Nihility support. At the very least, she can still apply a Quantum weakness to help break enemies if they don't have it yet, and her various stat debuffs are no joke for boosting team damage. So if that's all your team needs in a given combat scenario, Silverwolf is still a good option. And as a quick general note, the usual team building pointers I've discussed in my previous guides apply, like team member positioning, having sufficient survivability, and the like. So what are my early thoughts on Silverwolf's strength and pull value? Well, she's a very unique unit whose kit probably won't have a counterpart anytime soon, if at all, and her weakness Implant opens up very interesting team possibilities. If you really like certain DPS units that you invested heavily in but can't really maximize them against enemies that aren't weak against them, then Silverwolf can help with that. If there's a particular battle you might be struggling against, using Silverwolf to open up vulnerabilities that weren't possible before can help you get through it. With enough investment, she can also contribute good damage for your team alongside her debuffing role. One drawback is that her abilities and debuffs are generally single target focused, so she might struggle somewhat in multi-target heavy battles. But there are workarounds, such as making her fast enough to apply multiple debuffs quickly. Her RNG mechanics can seem concerning at first, but team building strategies and knowing the importance of EHR, as discussed earlier, will greatly minimize that randomness. She still has a lot of untapped potential that will open up slowly as we keep expanding our roster. But it opens up a strange possibility because that also means that as we get more and more units, then we'll also have more unit variety and options for our team comps that can cover elemental weaknesses and possibly reduce the need for a weakness implanter. However, that will take a very long time, a lot of resources to invest in, and even then, I don't think that will make her anywhere near obsolete, as she will still enable comps that aren't possible without her weakness implant. And of course, free-to-play players won't be pulling and building every unit available. It's also possible that there are enemies that have particular weakness gimmicks that are designed to make Silverwolf shine more, or to specifically counter her. Ultimately, I wouldn't say that she's the next best thing to a must pull, and even without a weakness implanter in your roster, there are and will be more team comps that can still clear endgame content, and that you'll also keep growing your elemental coverage to pit against different boss varieties. Still, Silverwolf for me is a great and unique pickup, one whose growth will be very interesting to see. And that's going to be all for this Silverwolf guide. Let me know in the comments what you think of her, whether you're a Silverwolf wanter or haver. I would love to know. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!